Melissa, would you call to order and do the roll call of the meeting for Timnath Development Authority?
Chairperson Mark Sukup. Commissioner Rick Collins.
Here.
Commissioner Aaron Pearson.
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Lake.
Here.
Commissioner Brett Hansen.
Here.
Is there any public comments for the TDA? Okay. Consent agenda. Anybody have any questions or comments? Could I have a motion?
I would like to move the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes unanimously. Reports. Do we have any reports? And I don't believe we do.
Reports for this.
Thank you. And then resolution ratifying prior acts and recognizing continuing electronic participation by board members during the duration of COVID-19. Town Attorney Rogers, do you want to take over that?
Thank you, Chairperson. The board will recall that as a result of the stay-home order, the board was required to hold an electronic meeting for the April 28th meeting, and the board took action at that meeting. This resolution would ratify the actions taken at that meeting and would also would reaffirm the continued ability of commissioners to participate electronically in meetings if they deem it to be necessary for the protection of their health. If there are any questions regarding the resolution, I'd be happy to address them.
I don't think we have any questions. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution?
So moved.
Do I have
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Any other comments?
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We're adjourned now. We'll now start the Timnath Town Council meeting.
Mayor Mark Sukup.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rick Collins.
Here.
Councilmember Aaron Pearson.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Councilmember Brett Hansen.
Here.
Melissa, do we have any amendments to the agenda? No. Okay. Town Manager West, do you you have the public comments, I believe.
I do. I think we're going to have some comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and the council. I want to start by noting that during the period when the public was commenting via email on the proposed Learning Center item that's going to be before you later this evening, there was some great dialogue. There were some great points made. There was some criticism that was directed at the town, and that's all, of course, perfectly appropriate. There was also one comment in particular that was brought to our office's attention that in my view crossed the line. And I wanted to note for the council and for the public in advance of the comment period tonight that the town does have guidelines for public comment. They have decorum rules that are posted on the television screen outside the meeting, and they've had those rules in place for several years. They're most recently updated in 2019. So I just wanted to note for the public and the council's information that the rules were adopted to foster an atmosphere of civility and that is respectful to diverse opinions and allows presentation of positions that vary from the position of others without the fear of insult and interruption and intimidation. And so that's the general intent of the guidelines. And one of the specific rules in the guidelines is that threats are not permitted. No attendee shall make threats or other forms of intimidation to or against any person in the meeting room. So that goes for the council. It goes for other members of the public who wish to comment. It applies to staff as well. So just wanted to note for everybody's reference that those guidelines apply whether a person is offering public comment in the meeting or whether they're doing it via email. And again, no need to single any commenter out, but there was a set of comments that went across the line because it included threats of personal retribution against individual council members, and that's not appropriate in this setting. Thank you.
Thanks, Town Attorney. Wes, do we have public comments?
We do, Mayor. We do have a number of people signed up. So with your permission, I'm going to call them and then they can come up and
Can you tell me how he's on the list?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I've got 2 others signed up under general. I just want to make sure they don't want public access to public comment. So 7 to 9.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
First signed up is, I think it's a Mr. Jeff, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Jeff Cullers.
And I'll make a quick comment. You've got everybody on public comment has 3 minutes to present their position. At 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I'll give you a 10-second warning to help you know when to wrap up. And you might turn on the mic. There's a little ear thing there. They had to show me too.
To discuss the daycare center application, and I want to make sure this is the right time to do it rather than
It is.
later on.
It is.
Understood.
Thank you for asking.
I'm an attorney in Fort Collins, and I represent one of the neighbors, Ms. Tanya Henry, and my remarks about 5 minutes. I would request that I have those extra 2 minutes, or my client is going to allow me to take 2 minutes of her time. I'd request that accommodation if possible.
That's fine. If you could speak up a little more because of the mask.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm sorry about that.
I understand.
So we're going to run through several points about the daycare center application. As you all understand, this is a request for 3 different waivers to the land use code. Number 1, the code requires that the applicant for a waiver submit the waiver request form, and that includes a few different things, and one of them is why the standard cannot be met that they're requesting a waiver from, and also the applicant is supposed to explain the consequences if there is no waiver granted. In the board packet that I looked at before the meeting, I noticed that there was no application provided. So if there hasn't been an application provided, I would say that I would submit that it'd be improper to vote on an incomplete application, especially when there's no information about the consequences of no waiver. Second point I'd like to make is on the contents of the waivers themselves. The applicant is seeking a waiver in the land use code, and the waiver section, as you all know, is section 2.9.15, and it allows a waiver for specific, and this is the definition, specified minor deviations from the code while staying consistent with the intent. And I think the code does seem to allow a proposal for multiple waivers. And I would suggest that if there's 3 waivers being requested, we're crossing the line from where it's no longer minor. But even if we look at each waiver in isolation, these are not minor waivers. The first one is a buffer requirement between the commercial and residential use on what I understand is the west side of the property, and the applicant wants that reduced from 30 feet to 17 feet. In other words, they want to cut the buffer from almost in half. That's not a few feet. That's not a minor request. The second waiver is the south side that fronts River Pass Road. The applicant wants a waiver from 7 feet down to 25 feet on the setback. Again, that's not a few feet. That is beyond minor. The third waiver is a change in the access point that would otherwise be required to change the access to the south side of the property rather than the north side of the property. Now, my client does prefer that the parking access be on the south side of the property, But I would again note that this is not a minor deviation from what would otherwise be required. It completely changes the layout of the property. It's not minor. And so really what's going on here is that the applicant wants variances. They want 3 variances. And a variance is defined in the code, and it's a grant of relief from the requirements of the code, which permits construction in a manner that would otherwise be prohibited by the code. And I believe the staff report that's been submitted to you admits as much. In order for the applicant to build in the manner proposed, which is a 10,000 square foot building and 37 parking spaces, they're asking for substantial relief from the code requirements. The code's criteria for a variance backs up what I'm saying. The criteria focus on physical circumstances of the property that make a strict application of the code render the property unbuildable. That's exactly what's going on here. As you might notice from the map, the property is narrow and it's long and skinny. And the applicant is not asking for a few feet to here or there in order to bring this project over the line to make it doable. They're asking for substantial changes that instead of a few feet, we're asking for a few dozen feet that enable a few dozen parking spaces. This is really a variance. The applicant should be required to follow the variance procedure in section 2.9.13, which is a much more detailed procedure. I'll take this argument a step further and note that the staff reports that the daycare center is a use by right. I would disagree with that. It is a use permitted with conditions, which requires a development site plan review. In this case, the Planning Commission permitted something that I haven't had a chance to really go into exactly what they permitted, but it's obviously something that requires significant relief from the land use code. The relief here takes the form of waivers that the town asks the town council, that the developer now asks the town council, asks you all to provide. The waivers are a much more relaxed standard than which they really need, which is a variance. So I'd ask the town council reject this short circuiting of the land use code to backdoor in approvals of this project in the form of waivers when they need to be variances. The town council should make sure that planning staff and the developer follow the land use process, even if it's more work. Finally, even if you decide to look at the merits of the waivers, criteria is not 3. Criteria 3 is not met. Criteria 3 is that the waiver is necessary because otherwise the code, and I'm going to quote, would physically preclude the construction of a project otherwise meeting the requirements of the code or the intent of the code. In this case, I don't think that submissions by the applicant that are before you meet that standard. They show that they cannot construct their project as proposed, but they haven't shown that there's just no project at all that could be constructed on this property. It's just that the one that they want is too big. So to wrap up, I believe, and on behalf of my client, that the daycare center proposed is simply larger in scale than what the land use code would otherwise by default permit. That's the crux of our concerns. The land use code is that the land use code has significant provisions, and if those can just be waived in significant ways as requested here, then what is the use of the land use? What is the purpose of the land use code? This would be permitting a project that's vastly larger than what otherwise would be allowed. And it's outside the scope of what I believe the intent of the neighborhood commercial district is, which is to serve the neighborhood. The staff report that's in front of you right now, which is like a question and answer, notes that this site was chosen because it's centrally located to serve all of Timnath. That's not the purpose of the neighborhood commercial zoning. The neighborhood commercial zoning is to serve the neighborhood. This is a larger scale that's intended to serve the whole town. So we would request that the board deny the variance process and we deny the variance or the waivers that are requested and instead require the developer to go through the variance process, which would provide a much more meaningful review. And those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, next on the list is a Miss Tanya Henry.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Henry, and I live at 6606 Tuxedo Park Road, basically right across from where the daycare seems planned. And to be clear, it's not neighbors against a daycare whatsoever. It's simply that we feel that the
Tanya, could you pull that down? There you go. Thank you. I want to hear what you say.
That the proposal is too large and that the setbacks being asked are basically invasive, especially for those of us that live across the street from it. That precludes any landscape or enough landscape to basically not make us be looking at the back of a 10,000 square foot building, which we feel like will negatively impact our property values. So we're not against a daycare. We just would like it to be sized more appropriately for the space that you're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have down Miss Dana Garvey. My apologies.
Good evening, council members. My name is Dana Garvey, and I live at 6616 Tuxedo Park Road, which is right across the street. I'm very passionate about children and about this issue, so I get a little emotional. It does not affect how I feel about the issue. It is just how I express myself. Although as a resident, I do fully support an entrance to a daycare center that would be across the street coming off of River Pass Road. I do not support any of the landscape waivers for the reason that both the previous two individuals spoke to. So the aesthetics of the neighborhood are residential. And when you have those setbacks that are much, much closer to the street on every side, you're going to create some issues with aesthetics and with property value. The biggest issue for me is the safety of the children in the neighborhood. One of the concerns I have is that every day when I leave my home, I head east on Tuxedo Park Road, I turn left onto Summerfields and head north. At this point in time, traffic is not nearly what it will be when school is in session, when buses potentially may be running, which we know at this point, Poudre School says that 90% of their children, they will not be busing, increasing traffic. When I look to my south, to my right, there are already issues with traffic at that point. Visibility is reduced. It is very close to the four-way stop there at Summerfields and River Pass Road, and multiple times I have not been able to see cars that are coming north from Summerfields or turning left due to the sign. So my concern is for the children in the neighborhood who are walking to school. I'm very worried that this is going to create some issues for parents. I'm a daycare parent. I know how parents drive when they go to daycare and when they're leaving daycare to get to work. It is not an easy, happy, mellow drive. People have business to attend to, and that's how they drive. I'm concerned that there are going to be children who are crossing from Summerfields over, coming down Tuxedo Park, hitting that intersection of Tuxedo Park Road and Summerfields, and having major issues with visibility. So having setbacks that are wider is going to, one, increase issues with visibility at that corner. My other concern is going to be if there are individuals who are parking on the south side of Tuxedo Park Road, and we do know that when you are a daycare parent, you find a parking spot as quickly as you can and you take your child in. If there are no parking spots available in that parking lot, the closest place to an entrance on River Pass Road to park is going to be right there at the stop sign facing east on Tuxedo Park Road so they can run their child around the building and come back. That's going to further reduce visibility on a narrow residential street, affecting individuals who are leaving that neighborhood to go to work, to leave their neighborhood to go do something with their child, to take their kids to school. So the visibility at that corner is one of my concerns. The safety of the children in this neighborhood is paramount. I have family friends who were present when the child at Lopez Elementary School passed away, who were physically present. And it concerns me that our children may be put in a similar situation where they may not fully understand the rules of traffic, who are relying on adults and visibility to keep our children safe. And so I have some major concerns about parking on Tuxedo Park Road and about the setbacks that are being proposed by a daycare. And although my concerns about my property value are essential, it is the children, and I really implore you to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Mayor, is Mr. Russell Henry.
So I would first like to thank whomever it was in the last virtual meeting that asked if the neighbors had been consulted. We had not. Indeed, we made many calls to the city to try and find out the details of what was being proposed. I'm very glad we watched. I can't remember who asked that question, but thank you for asking. This is not trivial. There is a tremendous impact financially for each property along that street. tremendous. Mr. Pearson, I believe you're a realtor. We have an accountant. We have other people who understand the financial impact of such a facility in a small neighborhood. This is like bad eminent domain. Excuse me. This is a bad idea. It hits us financially. The logistics of putting an entrance on a narrow street are ridiculous. Imagine 500 trips a day, all going down your street in front of your house. That's what you're proposing with this variance, with this waiver. That's a bad idea. You're putting a daycare facility with 173 children next to a park, which will be used by the daycare facility, 173 kids. What about the residents? What about their children? Overcrowding a park, overcrowding a playground, policing. Dana said it very eloquently. What about the safety concerns? So this facility is way too large. There is no neighbor here who objects, and there are many. There is no neighbor who objects to a daycare per se. We only object to the scale and the routing of the traffic surrounded by this. For that reason, we ask that you set aside these waivers, deny them, go ahead and approve a facility that's reasonable, the size for the community. This is not a major intersection. The property is small, and this is a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, your mayor is Mr. William Jenkins.
Good evening. My name is Dr. William Jenkins, live at 5507 Sugarloaf Court in Timnath. I am against the setback waivers requested by the developer. I think it's noteworthy that the original land use code that was adopted in 2002 and the associated zone map designated this property C1, and that land use code expressly prohibited a child care facility in this zone. In 2015, the land use code was replaced by a new land use code, and the C1 designation was replaced with NC, or neighborhood commercial, for all C1 zones. This new zone designation, NC, allows for child care centers upon the condition of a development site review by the Planning Commission. So, in 2015, the zone criteria was changed without input from the neighborhood. If a zone designation change was requested today, say from R2 to R4, I believe it would require a neighborhood meeting and input from affected residents. That was not done in this case. I also think it's important to recognize what the intent of the NC zone designation defines as intended uses within this zone. And I'm quoting from the NC zone description from the current Timnath Land Use Code. Quote, the NC neighborhood commercial district is intended to provide immediate residential neighborhoods access to commercial centers that contain smaller scale service, retail, and community facilities use. This district is heavily dependent on pedestrian and cycling traffic, with a secondary emphasis on the automobile. Complete and convenient access to nearby residential areas and between uses within this district is essential. This proposed development clearly does not meet the intent of neighborhood commercial. It is wholly dependent on automobile traffic, and lots of it. It would better fit within the community commercial zone designation. This 10,000 square foot facility with 37 parking spaces is huge and will draw traffic from all over Timnath and likely Windsor and beyond, not just the neighborhood. This is not a neighborhood commercial use. Waiving setback requirements of this zone just allows for the largest possible facility being built in this narrow strip of land to the detriment of the neighborhood. Please do not approve the setback waivers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, there's a Matthew Kelly here, I believe, signed up.
Thanks for listening to us and giving us the opportunity to talk. It's lovely to see all your faces. I wanted to try to paint a picture, and I think the biggest concern that I have is that we have safety concerns. And I don't think that that's something that we should just put on the wayside. You have to understand that this street is a place where my son and at least 7 friends are playing baseball because it's not on TV. They're out in the middle of the street and have to go to the side of the street every time a car comes by. At this point, when we're adding a daycare that's going to need 170 people or kids in there, that's going to have significant traffic increase. We're in a neighborhood. We're not in a business area where that much traffic can go through. Not in a safe way. I appeal to you to consider that we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. This daycare does not fit the land it's trying to go on. Again, it's been said that we can go with any kind of daycare that's there that fits. If it were a smaller daycare with less people coming through, that would be a different story. But we're trying to make land waivers to where the building is so large that once Learning Express is done with that property, what are we going to do with it? Who's going to want to move in there when it's a large, big property that doesn't fit? That's concerning. And I think that's what I would appeal to you guys to think about as you're considering the waivers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony Maestas? And then a Josh Hirsch? Oh, thank you. And then finally, Mayor, we have a Jim Huan, I believe. So staff had reached out to have some questions from a local realtor on the reference to values and how that might potentially impact.
Thank you. My name is Jim Howen, and I would like to disclose that I'm not 100% abreast as far as all of the details having to do with the learning center and daycare, as far as the site plan and the setbacks and things of that nature that are being mentioned. So I was simply asked to give my opinion. I have been involved with Timnath Ranch North and South since the beginning of each of the developments with a local builder, and so obviously very familiar. And we, have a lot of people that we deal with throughout the area all the time. So I'm just giving my humble professional opinion on that. We started building here literally, prior to Bethke even being complete and open at the very beginning of time there. But as far as just my personal opinion on whether it adds or subtracts from value of a property, assuming, a reasonable building and whatnot that's not offensive, or I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to say here, but it's going to hurt the views or things of that nature on the neighborhood. I can honestly say that in my opinion, I would think that the daycare and learning facility would probably be 90% children from residents in the neighboring developments. And probably one of the largest obstacles that we've always faced with selling houses in Timnath is just the travel time for everything. Having to, I agree with the lady who spoke earlier that everybody's gets in a rush and whatnot. And Timnath, unfortunately, for a long time had no conveniences whatsoever. And so that was a big obstacle for us to sell around. I think that actually having a young child facility in the neighborhood would actually be a large positive amenity that majority of people would find useful for themselves with children less than 5 years old. Most likely they would take advantage of that. And once again, this is, without knowing exactly the construction details and things of those other natures, I'm just stating my opinion as far as whether or not the actual business aspect of it would be seen as a positive to the majority of residents that we have dealt with over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all that signed up, Mayor.
Okay, thanks. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda payables. Anybody have any questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt the payables consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. The consent agenda other. Any comments? Do I have a motion?
This is, just so people know, this is like we did on the TDA. The Robert explained electronic use of equipment for meetings when it's done electronically, and we're just going to, with this motion, adopt hopefully this resolution.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, this is the motion to adopt the
Do
motion.
I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, reports. Brett, you had a report that you wanted to provide.
Sure. I don't have much to add from what I included in the packet, just a report of the Metro District 101 presentation that the town put on a week ago. Had 8 or 9 members from the community attend. I'm hoping that the main benefit of this presentation will actually be more in those who might want to watch after. And I think, and as part of the Metro District Committee that the town is putting together, that'll be filled with residents from the committee, we'll be looking at further ways of outreach and educating residents to help them know best how to navigate the Metro District situation. So I just got those applications today. For those that are on the committee, there were, I think, 9 that applied, and I gave a quick skim of those applications this afternoon, and looks like a lot of very qualified people, so I'm excited to start going through that.
Great, thanks. Any other reports from anybody? Okay. Finance update. Christine, do you have an update you'd like to give?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one additional item. We were able to complete the analysis for the May sales taxes we just received and wanted to let council know that for the month of May, tax revenues for the town were up approximately 21% in comparison to last year, May 2019. And so year to date for the 5 months ending May, we're up about 18% in comparison to last year. So just wanted to let you know that right off, hot off the presses.
Great, thank you. Don Toronto, do you have anything on your engineering report you'd like to add?
The only thing, it's a written report that I think everybody's had a chance to look at, but I wanted to emphasize the improvements, the maintenance improvements that we're going to be doing in Harmony subdivision between July 13th to 24th. We'll be doing seal coating there. We're sending out a significant amount of information to the residents so they understand the timing and the issues associated with that, because there'll be 24 hours of time when they can't drive on the street at different locations. So just wanted to emphasize that we're sending out all that to the Harmony residents, and they should look for it. If they have any questions, give us a call.
Awesome, thanks. I think the community development report's pretty complete in what's there.
Yes, Mayor, that's pretty complete. Unless you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Great. Any questions? I don't think so. Staff report, Chief Jones, anything to add that's on that? No, Mayor. Okay, thank you. Manager report, Wesley, do you have anything to add?
Yes, sir. Just one additional item. In my manager's report, I had listed out the work session for the 28th. We were going to delve into the public safety site and just provide you an update. It's come to my attention that we now have a full slate of council people here for the 14th. So staff's recommending that we, with your permission, we move that work session to the 14th. We'll be ready to tackle that. And then we use the 28th to kick off our budget discussion. So we'd like to try to get that kicked off towards the end of July, no later than the first part of August. But with your permission, we'd like to schedule a work session, kick that off so we can start down the road to having a good discussion around capital improvement programs.
So just to check, July 14th, it'll be an hour and a half session, I think.
Yes, sir, that's
before
correct.
the meeting. Are you guys all okay with that? All right. And then on July 28th, that'll be a 4-hour session. We can sort of decide whether we want to do it at 12 or at 1:30 or whatever. But it will be a 4-hour budget discussion on July 28th. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right. I think
Thank
we're
you,
all
sir. I
good.
appreciate that.
7A, a resolution approving town council waivers to the learning experience plan. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully I have a deep enough voice that you can hear me through the mask. I will, so we'll put this up here. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is waiver requests for the learning experience site plan. The request is per section 2915 of the land use code. The site is located at the northwest corner of Summerfield's Parkway and River Pass Road in the West Village subdivision. I apologize that it's only showing up.
Is this the only,
There we go.
great, thank you.
So like I was mentioning, this is at the northwest corner of Summerfield's Parkway and River Pass Road in the West Village subdivision, as highlighted there in the blue outline. The Planning Commission approved the site plan for a 10,000 square foot building with an outdoor play area and playground. The site was also posted with a development under review sign in February, stating a development proposal was under review for the property. And in addition to that, the property was listed on the development under review map on the website, which has a description of the application and a link to submittal documents that are available for public view. The town council, in certain circumstances per land use code section 2915, may waive any of the dimensional and parking standards contained in this code. A waiver permits specific minor deviations from the code while staying consistent with the intent. A waiver cannot be granted if it would create conflicts with other town requirements. Waivers from the applicable land use code standards require the town council approval, and staff is recommending approval of these particular waivers as described as follows. So the applicant is requesting 3 waivers, 1 waiver from the buffer yard standards, 1 waiver from the landscape setback to parking lots from adjacent streets due to the configuration of the lot, and then a waiver from the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards for driveway access to a major collector road. Since the lot is narrow and bounded by 3 adjacent street frontages, the 2 setback requirements are not able to be met. Per table 5.5 of the land use code, the buffer yard requirements between neighborhood commercial and R2 single family residential requires a buffer type 30, and that buffer type 30 shall consist of a landscaped area a minimum of 30 feet in width, landscaped as a barrier, with 1 large deciduous tree for every 60 lineal feet of buffer yard and 1 medium evergreen tree planted on a triangular staggered spacing for every 15 lineal feet of buffer yard. The applicant is proposing a 17-foot wide buffer yard with an evergreen and ornamental trees and landscaping, along with a 6-foot high privacy fence to the adjacent property. Staff supports this reduction to the buffer yard requirements because this is the parking lot portion of the site plan and not the building or the outdoor play area that would be immediately adjacent to the residential property. In addition, the proposed landscaping and privacy fence will provide adequate buffering. This waiver will also allow for additional parking spaces on site. The table 5.5 waivers would improve the health and safety, as it would allow for additional on-site parking, which would remove more vehicular traffic from Tuxedo Park Road. Staff has required the applicant to communicate with the adjacent property owner to the west in regards to the fencing and buffering, and that letter from the adjacent property owner was in your packet. I'm sorry, it's kind of hot with that thing. And then per section 5.7.8.2.c.4 of the land use code, landscape setback to parking lots should be 30 feet from arterial streets or 25 feet from other streets. This setback may be reduced to 15 feet from the right-of-way or property line if used in combination with a 3 to 4 foot masonry stone decorative wall. The applicant is proposing the north setback from the parking lot be reduced to the 15 feet because they are providing for a wall for screening from the parking lot to Tuxedo Park Road. The south side of the property, which fronts River Pass, does not meet the required 25-foot setback. Staff is supportive of the south side waiver of the setback down to 7 feet because with the right-of-way, within the right-of-way, there is an 8-foot sidewalk, a roughly 15-foot wide tree lawn, and then the proposed 7 feet landscape area on the south side of the parking lot that includes evergreen trees that can grow up to 8 to 10 feet in height and shrubs that can grow up to 4 feet in height. This will create about a 30-foot plus buffer to the road of River Pass Road. The third waiver came about following the Planning Commission meeting on June 2nd of this year. The applicant and staff discussed the possibility of accessing the site from River Pass Road. Currently, the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards prohibits the access of a driveway to a street with the classification of a major collector if there is an available access to a lower classification street, such as a local road, which is the classification of Tuxedo Park Road. The applicant is requesting that this criteria be waived so they can access the site from River Pass Road to alleviate some of the traffic concerns related to Tuxedo Park Road raised by the existing residents. The applicant has an initial design of the access from River Pass Road, which was also attached in your packet. Should this alternative access be approved, the change to the site plan would not require Planning Commission or Council review and approval. Also, by accessing River Pass Road, the potential traffic impacts and potential impact to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Tuxedo Park Road will be reduced. So those are the waivers. Staff had reviewed the waivers against the criteria outlined in the land use code. So the waiver review criteria outlined in 2915.5, staff had felt that the waivers, by these waivers, there's no adverse impacts to health, safety, or welfare to the environment. The table 5.5 waiver would improve health and safety as it would allow for additional on-site parking, thereby alleviating the potential impact to some of the on-street parking on Tuxedo Park Road. The Lucas, Larimer County Urban Area Street Standard waiver would improve safety as well as it would allow for access to the off-road pass road, which would thereby reduce the traffic and potential parking on Tuxedo Park Road. And then criteria C, staff feels that it meets this criteria due to the narrowness of the lot, and it is bound by 3 adjacent street frontages. Those 2 setback requirements are not being able to be met. Staff supports those reduction to the waiver as I had stated previously with the landscaping and the buffering. So with that, I will turn it over to Don.
And the only reason that I think I'm going to speak, Matt, you want to go first? Says green.
There you go.
Okay, got it. And so I'll just try to address the traffic issues a little bit from some of the comments. Number one, the traffic studies and reports that were done for the entire development and this area did envision the type of traffic we're talking about associated with this. And so it has been anticipated. The roads and classifications of the roads are large enough and will have the capacity associated with the traffic that's been anticipated. And so I'm just telling you that so that you understand that this is exactly the type of use that was envisioned when those roads were put in and when they were approved.
We'll have a brief presentation from Alex Schuman.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. As Kevin has outlined, and you guys have been shared with, I guess I've got
Why
to...
don't you introduce yourself real quick?
My name is Alex Schuman with Schuman Companies. I'm the developer and applicant here of the site that we've been working very closely with the learning experience and town staff here for, I think, going on 6 or 7 months now. The 3 waivers, I guess, just maybe to provide some clarity on how we've got to where we're at today. Really, I guess the 2 setbacks and landscape buffer waivers that I'm here requesting approval on this evening would provide an additional 20 parking spots onto the site above the current land use code that would only need 17 for a facility of this size. But given market fundamentals and really the expertise and history of the learning experience and operating the amount of facilities that they do across the country, they feel that a 35 parking spot count is a minimum that would really address, I think, most of the concerns that have been coming across through the community from a parking standpoint. I do have a representative from the learning experience, Mike Zambori, that will patch in here that was unable to attend this evening, but he is online here, Zoom, that he will be able to speak to the overall operations and maybe answer some questions that you guys may have on an overall standpoint. And then obviously the 3rd waiver, which I think is in everyone's best interest in moving, the abundance of traffic from Tuxedo onto River Pass that came about after our planning commission approval. But I will see if we can get Mike on the line here, and he'll go through an operations overview of the facility. There you go, Mike. I think we got you on the screen.
Perfect. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. And again, I apologize. I cannot be there in person, but I'm happy to be here virtually with everybody. I am Mike Zamboria. I'm the Director of Development for the Learning Experience. And as Alex had mentioned, we've been working very closely with his team, as well as the city staff over the last many months to address your concerns, any concerns the residents may have. We're really trying to make this work for everybody, and we want to make everybody certain that we are aware of, you know, what you're looking for and trying to address everything adequately. As Alex had mentioned, we operate many centers across the country. In the Denver area especially has been a great market for us, including Fort Collins. We've had an existing center operating in Fort Collins for quite a few years now. And you know, relating to the parking specifically and traffic and some of the concerns I heard earlier, we've done many internal reviews on this. This building is very standard. In a sense, we call it our prototype, if you will. 35 parking spots is very typical. We have a very staggered pickup and drop off procedure, which is good for the parents and families that are gonna be, you know, coming to our school and enrolling their children. We pride ourselves in being very flexible, allowing drop off times from as early as, you know, 6:30 or 7 in the morning throughout 9 or 10 o'clock, which just reduces the amount of demand at any given time. And the same is true in the afternoon for pickup. We allow our parents to pick up anytime they please, whatever works with their schedules, their workloads, you know, between mothers and fathers and grandparents and anybody else. So I'm happy to help answer any questions you guys may have. We're excited to be coming to your town and really looking forward to this opportunity. I cannot hear you guys. I apologize if you're saying something.
No, thank you, Mike. It sounds like, yeah, the council, there's no questions. I appreciate you popping in on virtually this evening.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Well, great. Well, I'm available, I guess, if you guys have any additional questions, and I guess I'm hopeful that, I guess, to receive your guys' support this evening so that we could bring an added amenity to the community.
You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, could you briefly go through what kind of outreach you've done as far as the neighbors that are directly impacted along both sides of those roads?
I mean, besides talking to the neighbor directly to the west, I have not spoken directly to anyone else on the street, given I felt that they were the most impacted, given that the variance, the one variance was on that side adjacent, and as the letter states, they had no issue with the proposed project.
Have you given any thought to trying to bring the number down as far as your number enrolled?
You're talking kids
Yeah,
in the...
instead of 170, if it was 120, I don't know. I'm just trying to...
Yeah, so those counts were really by the learning experience, by their counts on there. If you read through the packet, even though it's given the square footage of the site, it can at maximum hold 170. They're really at their best case scenarios, really they're operating at an 80% capacity. And then there's additional reductions given part-time students, absentee, sick days, et cetera. And so on a best case, I mean, they're really operating at more at a 75% level on an average.
During the year, how many times do you have like a parent or a grandparent day?
You know, that I don't know. I guess, is Mike still on the line?
Looks like it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He's on the line.
Okay.
Hi,
Did you hear that question, Mike?
Yeah, the question was regarding having special like parent or grandparent day where you would drive traffic to the site at a specific time.
Yeah, we the only time that should really happen is in the early stages, as we ramp up and try to gain enrollment, we'll do some sort of, grand opening, if you will, open house event. That'll be a one-time thing, really, once we open the building. But throughout the course of operation, we don't really hold events at the school. We do like to work with a lot of local partners. We're big into work and family type things. So we'll partner with other organizations and other companies to either go to their campuses or, other places in the community to do those types of events.
Mike, this might be a question for you too. On your sites, do you prefer to have just one entrance and exit?
We do. So, and the reasoning behind, or let me back up first, actually. Are you referring to for the road, for the cars or for people into the building?
Or if you had to get emergency vehicles into the site, it looks like they're just one in and out.
Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood you at first, but in a sense, we don't see it as a concern, just simply due to how this site flows. I think the circulation on this particular site, just the way it's designed, flows very well, very circular. Other sites, it might be more challenging with just having one, ingress and egress, but I really don't foresee this being an issue, even for fire department emergency access. Ultimately, they're going to have to make sure this works with their turning radiuses and all that stuff, which I'm pretty sure has already been addressed, as far as I know.
Yeah, and Mayor Pro Tem, I will address the emergency vehicles. PFA has reviewed the proposed access off of River Pass, and all they require is that the emergency access easement be the entire length of that entrance drive. That way they can pull in if there is an emergency that they have to go to. But they have been involved with the review of the entire site and even the new access off of River Pass, and that location works for them.
If I could ask staff one quick question about if we did not approve these waivers, then could the developer still put in a 10,000 square foot building with a small parking lot and access on Tuxedo instead of going out to River Pass?
Correct. Yeah, the land use code does not have a maximum building size. The minimum parking requirements for this would have been 19 spaces. The applicant has looked at that, and they could provide 20 spaces that still meet the minimum parking and the minimum setbacks. The building size, like I mentioned, there's not a maximum requirement there for that. So they would still be allowed to build that size of a building with the access off of Tuxedo Park with 20 spaces meeting all criteria.
So it seems to me that by having these waivers is going to be better for the neighborhood to have these waivers than if they don't have the waivers, because it reduces the parking or it increases the parking and keeps it from going into Tuxedo Road.
Correct. That was what staff based our recommendation of approval on, is that it would provide more on-street or on-site parking from 19 to 35 or 37 spaces. So it provides more spaces on site. With the access flipping to River Pass, it then alleviates the major in and out from Tuxedo Park Road, to where then folks are going to be using the major collector roads of River Pass and Summerfields to access to the site. So yes, that is where staff was reviewing those against.
Okay, thank you.
Brett?
Yeah, Aaron covered some of the questions I had. So I guess one question I had for staff. So let's say the nightmare scenario occurs and every day we've got 40 cars backed up on River Pass trying to get in. Does the town have any authority to, we'll say, encourage the business to adapt their business practices in such a way that it's not disruptive in a public space?
We can always, if we get code complaints of situations like that, we hear from our police officers that River Pass is backed up. We can obviously make contact with the operator with TLE, notifying them of those concerns. The other thing that River Pass does offer is that there is a center turn lane. So if there are folks that are queued up on River Pass, they can be in that center turn lane that won't impede the flow traffic of that road. So they would just kind of be queuing up in the middle of the road. But we can always make contact with them to see if they can alleviate any of those concerns.
Okay. And then just to clarify, so we've got a couple different site plans here, one with an entrance on Tuxedo Park and one on River Pass. If all waivers were approved tonight, it's definitive. River Pass would be the entrance and exit of the parking lot?
Correct.
Okay. I think I would just offer what just to make sure I understand the intent of the waivers for 1 and 2, the landscaping setbacks. The intent of these waivers is to allow the parking lot to be larger than would otherwise be required by the code.
Correct.
Okay. So the intent of these waivers is to mitigate the impact of the daycare from what the land use code requires.
Yes, it is. The intent of those is to hopefully alleviate on-street parking of Tuxedo Park Road with having the larger parking space.
Okay. I guess just my comment for the council would be, I spent a little time looking over the land use code myself over the last couple of weeks and reading the feedback from residents, and some of them gave me some good ideas and some things to explore. I wanted to at least know what my options were of how I felt I could vote. I mean, I would emphasize for the public that when our vote here has to be based off of what we see as legal criteria, not necessarily what we think is best or good, but it's what the land use code permits. I think a lot of the concerns of residents are valid concerns. I share a lot of them. I don't live that far from the area myself, and so I will not be immune from those traffic impacts. But I have trouble justifying a no vote on waivers whose sole intent is to mitigate the impact of the business on the community, particularly when it is possible for this site to be built at the size and the capacity and meet the code and not need any waivers, and then we wouldn't even have a vote. We wouldn't have any say, wouldn't come before the council. So unless there's different information brought to me, I have trouble finding a basis on which I could vote to reject these waivers. And I think those concerns that residents have raised should be addressed, even if we can't address them with this specific vote. I'm glad that the River Pass waiver was added. I think that was with response to feedback. And I asked that same question myself to staff after I watched the Planning Commission meeting a few weeks ago. And so I would just encourage that dialogue to continue. If everything passes tonight, that dialogue needs to continue between the business, between the neighbors, between the town government, to continue to make this work and make this be a net positive for the community. And I also just want to make sure we don't send a message to developers that if you try to put in waivers that are meant to mitigate your impact on the community, that the town is going to use that as a backdoor to force additional requirements that aren't required by the land use code. I think that would be a bad message to send. It would tell developers, get in, get out, don't care if you make people mad, and move on. And again, I think the concerns are valid, but from how the work I've done looking over this, I'm going to be voting to approve these waivers.
Yeah, so I think some of the questions that were brought up here were some of the same ones I was thinking of. I do have same concerns about parking along streets. I know right now when there's people in that open area on 3 Bell and River Pass, those cars do kind of get in the way a little bit of traffic. I wish there was a daycare when my kids were younger in the neighborhood, because we did have to go into Fort Collins. And my experience with that one was they did have the 2 entrances, which was really, really helpful there. I don't know if that's something, I know you did bring that up a little bit, but because I do feel like most of the traffic that will be
there because of this are probably mostly within our neighborhood and are probably cars that are driving within our neighborhood right now. I also live pretty close. I have a child at Bethke. I have to go through that intersection pretty much 99% of the time when I leave my house to go anywhere. I go through the intersection of Summerfields and River Pass. So, but I think some of the points that were made today about allowing the more, additional parking spaces, I would much rather them have more parking than to open it with 19 spots. My experience with daycare is, and I think it was brought up, is that it's not everybody dropping off at the same time. It's not everybody picking up at the same time. Not every single staff member is there at the same time. Their schedules vary as well. And I think some of this was in there. I had 2 children in the same daycare, and a lot of parents will have multiple children. So I don't think it's necessarily 171 families that will be using it. I do think, though, that going by that 80% occupancy, I think we have to look at it at 100%. We have to assume that they're going to have that highest number. But knowing that they've done traffic reports for that area, it's always been some kind of commercial since I've lived here, which has been prior to any home being built in West Village. It was some kind of commercial, and I think we need a daycare. And I think if some of these waivers mitigate some of the concerns, then I also feel like I would have to vote yes on that.
Staff, did you have any other comments? Mr. Schuman, do you have any other comments?
I do not.
I think you already set the stage on why you would vote the way. Aaron, do you want to set the stage on anything? Lisa, do you? Rick, do you? The question is there anything you would like to comment on what we vote?
I was just going to comment when I voted.
Okay. So this thing tears me apart, and I've spent more time with it over the last 2 weeks than I think any issue that we have in before the council by a lot. I felt the emotion that you had on concern of your safety of your kids. I've got 3 kids. I got 5 grandkids. I totally understand the concern for safety, and I would not at all be supporting of something that I thought was unsafe. I heard the comments about this facility being large, so I took it upon myself to call 4 childcare centers in Fort Collins that were in neighborhood areas. I asked them what their capacity was. The lowest one I had was 110. The highest was 220. So at 170, even at capacity, or 144, which is what they anticipate, that's a very average center. And I didn't see that was trying to get a lot out of that area. The other thing is my background is in real estate. My background is I represent a number of realtors. And so I called several of them to ask them what they felt the home values would do if a child care center went into a neighborhood. They were shocked that anybody thought that prices would go down. They believed that they'd actually go up because people with kids would want to buy in that neighborhood and be able to walk their kids to the child care center. And that was their comments to me. So all of which I don't think really sort of plays into this much. I don't believe, and town attorney, I'd like your comments on this. I don't believe the decision of can we deny or approve the child care center is something we're allowed to do. And can you help me out?
That's correct, Mayor. The decision of that category of use was made by the Planning Commission. So that decision is not before the council this evening, and a vote along those lines would be outside the scope of your authority, and I'd have really significant concerns about although the applicant hasn't made any threats or communicated any intent of this nature, I'd be very concerned about a Rule 106 challenge in district court. So I would strongly urge the council to base your decision on the criteria for the waiver that have been put in front of you, and whether you believe that those criteria are met. The staff has included their analysis of those criteria in pages 90 through 94 of your packet, and staff views that essential criteria have been met there. So that's their recommendation to you.
So if we proposed a motion to not allow this child center in there, we're exposing the town to a lawsuit?
That's right. You'd be clearly outside of your decision-making authority.
So I'm not happy that everybody who is here is upset. I feel the emotion. I think there's some misinformation that's gone out that have been mitigated, but our road is the waivers. And I think Mr. Schuman has been more than listening to the fact that first, the concern about traffic, mitigating it instead of having 19 cars on the parking lot and then having them park in the street, increasing it to 35 spaces, if I got that right, and which takes that traffic off the street, which creates a more safe environment. And the second is both the developer and staff finding an alternative to run the ingress and egress out to a collector street, which by far takes that off at Tuxedo and makes it a safer road. So I think there was a lot of effort done to make these waivers, and to deny, the only thing we're allowed to do, and correct me again, town attorney, but the only thing we get to do is determine on whether we approve the waiver or don't approve the waiver.
That's correct.
And to not approve the waiver is sort of like shooting our foot in spite of ourselves. If we deny the waiver, Mr. Schuman can still build this site, put the ingress egress on Tuxedo, have less parking spaces, all of which is detrimental to all the requests I heard here today. And so for that reason, I'm going to be voting for approval of the waiver. Does anybody else have any comments? Okay, I'll call the vote. I'll call the motion. Do you have?
Yeah, I would like to move the waiver for this project.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion carries. I'd like to thank you, Ms. Schuman. I'd like to make a couple comments though before we close this. First off, I'd like to direct to staff that in the future, there is no requirement that Mr. Schuman have a neighborhood meeting. Just like anybody that built a house in Timnath, you did not have a neighborhood meeting to put up your house. He was not required to have a neighborhood meeting for his childcare facility because that property was zoned for a childcare facility. That said, and in listening to the comments that have been made, I'd implore and request that the staff in the future, if we have a commercial development close by a neighborhood or residential development, that we do engage and ask the developer to hold a neighborhood meeting. And maybe if you guys could come back with some guidelines to the council for us to review and approve for that.
Will do, Mayor. We will, we have a set of land use code updates that we working on that we will tie that into. So we will bring it back as one whole package that will include that with next land use code update.
Thanks, Kevin. The second thing is I would also implore both the staff and Mr. Schuman, the site is approved, but to see if there's any alternatives for the best place, the best decision, the best, if there's an alternative that makes better sense than where we are today. And there may not be, I fully understand that, but I'd like the town to engage with Mr. Schuman, and he's been more than gracious up to this point, to take a look and see if there's another alternative. Okay. And then the last thing I'd like us to do is let's review the neighborhood commercial designation in the spots that are still in this town and say, do they still make sense or do they not? And based on this, you know, maybe take a relook at that. Okay, and you guys make the determination, maybe come back with some kind of report in the next 3 or 4 months on that. Okay. All right, yes, Rick.
You know, I'd like to piggyback on that. We might want to look at how we're going to treat the traffic that needs to walk across those streets then. And I know it always takes time to put in a crosswalk or put in lights that flash for a walkway. There's only one in and out there, so we might want to start looking ahead of time, because I don't know what your timetable is for building the project, but to have a way for the neighbors to cross the street there safely and make sure.
Can I just add
Yes,
that
Lisa.
there are already crosswalks at the intersection. I think somebody did mention earlier, I personally don't like the crosswalks there because when I cross, the Timnath Ranch sign gets in the way. Absolutely, of being able to see, if I'm on a vehicle, I have to be in the crosswalk before I can even see if there's people in the crosswalk. So, but I don't think that that is necessarily, I'm not sure that may be the Metro District, not necessarily the town, but maybe that's just something too, because that is kind of a tricky intersection right now.
I was thinking along the lines, if you go over to Windsor by the McDonald's, they put a flashing light there. So if any of the kids are going across or people going across, they can hit it. And way back, you can see a flashing light.
And I'd like to close with thanking the professional attitude that most of the people had on the emails and that, and we heard you. I mean, sometimes it's tough to come up and keep everybody happy, and this is one of those times, and I don't like it. But we heard you, and I think that's why we've got a different ingress egress that probably wouldn't have happened without the community coming back and questioning. And so, you know, your involvement, I think, made it safer and made it so that this was a better project than what it was when it first came to planning and zoning. So we appreciate everybody's comments and thoughts.
I'll just add one comment. Just for the education of the public here. This was what's considered a quasi-judicial matter, which meant it was dealing with specific property rights. And what it also meant is that council members couldn't respond directly to all the comments that were going around out there. I personally found that very frustrating. Just going through my normal perusal of social media, I really wanted to engage with the public on this more. And unfortunately, there are some matters that you just can't. But yeah, the council, there were council members that were reading the comments that are out there. There were council members, I know I read every single email, every word that came in, and I'm comfortable that the rest of the council did the same. So I am really grateful as well for the feedback that comes in and those that want to be part of trying to make things the best they can be.
Thanks, Fred. Resolution 7B, Town Attorney Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a follow-up resolution. The council will recall that you voted to create a finance committee. I think it was two meetings ago now. And the next step in the process is to appoint members to that board. As a reminder, This committee has two council member seats, and Mayor Sukup was already designated as the liaison, so he's the one of the presumptive council members. You have another council member seat that you need to fill, and then you have up to 5 resident seats that you can fill. We included in the staff report the names of the applicants who had submitted applications. And so you'll see that in the resolution, we have blanks there that need to be filled in. The staff recommendation would be that as soon as the council has a consensus on who would fill those seats and which term you'd like them to be slated in for, that we just are looking for a motion to appoint.
So we had 9 resumes come in for the Finance Committee. Unbelievable quality of people. Unbelievable. I mean, I'm blown away, and I'm looking over there at you, Wes. I mean, Wes has been through this a number of times with other towns. And I mean, if you want to make a quick comment, Wes, go ahead.
In 20-something years of local government, I've never been a part of a finance committee application process or a finance committee that's in front of you this evening with these kind of qualifications. And I've been all up and down the front range. So I was certainly impressed, Mayor, by the number and the scope and the breadth of the resumes and experience.
I literally had 9 applicants, and I could have put all 9 on the committee. I mean, just incredible quality. Fortune 500 CFOs, CEOs who run 700 people businesses. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I'm definitely going to be the weak link. So here's the slate I would like to propose to the town council. I would like to have Mayor Pro Tem Collins take the council position because Brett will be involved with the Metro District. Aaron's going to be involved with the Parks and Reservoir. Lisa volunteered to help with grant writing. And so Rick was left odd man out, but I think he wants to do the finance anyway. Then of the applicants, here's the 5 that I propose. One is Craig Oakers. He is president of Wells Fargo Bank in a number of different locations. A gentleman named, and he's in Harmony, Raimundo Chapa. Raimundo runs and is the CEO for the largest extramural business at CSU. There's 700 employees there. He just came in. He lives in Wild Wing. John Barkley, he's a controller and CFO of a development company. He's got a long history. He's a CPA, has developed up he does audits and internal controls for a number of companies. Sarah Izari, she's an international accountant and IT person mainly. She's worked in the IT area, has worked with a number of Fortune 500 companies. And lastly, Luke Wagner. Luke has been a controller of 2 medical companies here in town, and he lives in Timnath Ranch. Sarah lives in Timnath Ranch. John Barkley lives in Timnath Ranch. Raimundo Chapa lives in Wild Wing. He is the only applicant from Wild Wing. Craig Oakers, Rick Collins, and myself are all on Harmony. So I thought I got a good cross section of the entire community in the selection with it, and went from there. So I'd like to propose to the council that slate. Any comments? Could I have a motion to approve that? And I know you need dates, Robert. And what I'd like to do with the dates, if it's okay, is let us have our first meeting as a finance and see who wants 2 or 3 years, because I didn't ask them when we were doing it. So if it's okay, that's what I'd like to do.
So one way you could accomplish that is just in the motion to approve the resolution, amend it to delegate the authority to designate terms to say the mayor and the
Could,
mayor pro tem.
could we do that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to amend the motion that we determine the terms in the next 2 weeks. Or how would you like that said better?
So I think the motion would be to amend the resolution to delegate the authority to designate the terms to delegate that authority to the mayor and mayor pro tem.
Melissa, what he said.
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks for approving these. I'm really excited to work with them. They're really, really nice, good people. 7C, resolution approving formation, membership goals, responsibility of the Park Rec Office. Brian Williamson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the third committee that has been outlined by the new board or the new council. It falls in line generally with the other committees that have been formed. I do want to just point out a couple of things. One, we did rename it. It had talked about the parks and the reservoir in the naming. We are offering to name that as the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Committee. That falls in line with the PROST plan, which is part of the comprehensive plan that's been adopted. And I think that is a good guiding document for this committee to be charged with. So we wanted to kind of bring the naming convention in line with that as well. I did want to just point out that it's up to 7 members, and we did try to include up to 2 youth members. If there's some interest from the youth in Timnath, we would like to have them on. I think they bring a different perspective to the long-term planning for amenities and development of parks in the town and recreation as well. We do have the same staggered terms that we talked about with the Finance Committee. And then our meetings, we would meet every other month unless there was no business. And I foresee our meetings being kind of clustered around the budgeting process. One of the tasks for the committee will be working on the 5-year CIP programming for the parks and recreation open space. And then also, as we are working through design projects and working through construction awards, I think those would be places where the committee would actually probably be involved in those decisions as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that we might have. I'm only hoping that we get as much interest in this committee as we do to the Finance Committee.
I think we will, because I already have had some people reach out to me to ask about when applications are going to get started. So that is the question that I'm asking. When will these applications process open?
Tomorrow.
Fantastic. I think that's what I told them. So I'm very excited to be heading up this committee. I know there's a lot of interest. And as more people move here, I think that it's important that we're looking at the long-term vision of these open spaces and recreational opportunities. Especially, I know living in Broomfield and watching it grow from a very small town to a big town, they were really smart in how they picked up some land sort of in the middle of town, then at the outskirts of town, that they were able to turn into a huge amenity for that community, where they were able to put a rec center eventually and soccer fields and open space. And it's really a fantastic model that we could be looking at for something like that with a town of our size. So excited about it very much. Thank you for your work on it, Mr. Williamson.
Brian or Aaron, either one of you, isn't this also going to take a look at the rules and regulations of the reservoir?
Absolutely. I think we'll try to come up with some way to poll the people or survey the people, and I think that should be included perhaps in our survey for the town, so that we can come up with ideas to use that reservoir with our permitting processes for the use of the water, to make sure that it's in balance with what our town wants.
I agree, and that was the conversation that Matt and I were having, was about the reach out surveys that we'll have for the reservoir and kind of bringing recommendations for that policy up.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa. There you go.
Oh, it's either him or I. All right, no. I really appreciate that you're trying to involve some young people in that. So I do have just something to think about. If we could somehow prioritize trying to get a young person on that group, I think would be really important. And I think one thing is maybe we can make an exception to the term limit. A lot of young people don't know what they'll be doing in 2 years, or if we have somebody who's involved in other extracurriculars that timing might not work for their schedule, or maybe we get someone and they go off to college the next year. So just something to think about if we actually want to prioritize having someone between the ages of 12 and 18 on that group. I think we just need to maybe make some allowances for that, and then maybe think about how we want to advertise and promote that we are looking for young people as well.
One way to do that is to even think about like they do with the Board of Re. And say you're the.
We did discuss that as part of the formation, and although there is a 2-year term limit, there's no requirement that somebody couldn't leave after the first year of their term. And then we would just bring, so the terms are staggered, it's a 2-year term, but we'd turn over, or hopefully not, we would turn over half the board, but there would be the opportunity of turning over half the board every year. So we would just probably lump that extra seat into the awarding a term at that point. So I think if people got on and it was too much for them to handle, or it really didn't pique their interest, I think we would allow that to.
You're probably looking at a high school senior. If you're looking at the age you said, and we could reach out to the school counselors and say, do you have a person that would fit the bill? And that'd be sort of exciting.
I also wonder if talking to maybe the reservoir superintendent out there, he may know of some really active teenagers that would have a lot of input because they're actively using the reservoir or some other amenity that we already have.
Yeah, I already have a candidate in mind, so
Okay.
I'll let him know.
So the question before we vote on the resolution is, do you want to amend it that specifically slots, or keeping it open like it is, or do you want to specifically slot that we will have a junior member on that question? I don't know what the answer.
I would prefer that we say that we want a particular, to actually assign one spot maybe, and then maybe the other can allow for that. Because I think it can be intimidating for some of those young people if they think they're up against adults competing for a spot or something like that, would be my preference.
So Robert, can you help us here modify this resolution to include that?
Certainly. So a motion you could make, Councilor Lake, is to amend the resolution to reserve one seat for a minor, and I think that's all you need to do.
Junior.
What he said.
I'm good at that.
Well, I move for the creation of this committee as amended.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Brian. Wes, the CARE Act.
Yes, sir. So in front of you, in front of the council this evening is a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding related to the distribution of CARES Act funds. So I think as per my manager's report, some of the emails I've been including you on, all the managers in Larimer County, including the manager of Larimer County, have been working on a distribution method for CARES Act funding coming from the state. So we basically, there's basically two ways to think about this. The state has set aside monies, CARES Act money from the federal government to the counties. The top 5 largest counties got direct distribution. Counties after that have an opportunity to band together and come up with a distribution formula. And if they agree on that, and then they submit some sort of agreement or MOU to the Department of Local Affairs, that establishes what that distribution. If they don't, if any particular municipality does not do that, including the county, then that all gets reverted back to the state. And then there's this big, as you can imagine, large committee made up of different departments and different agencies and different representations that then get to decide how that money is carved up. So what we've done tonight is keep it pretty simple. So as the managers all have been huddling up the last 30 days, as we kept it pretty simple, we basically just went through and said, we're going to proportion according to population. That's how we're going to set aside funds. And then it's up to each agency, each government entity, then to apply to the Department of Local Affairs for monies they believe are eligible for reimbursement. So for instance, the community grant program we just went through, the cost associated with not only setting up the grant program, but also distributing those funds, we could then submit those to Department of Local Affairs for reimbursement. So those are the kinds of things that we'll be doing. Should the council approve this memorandum, we'll be looking at those opportunities. We've internally calculated we probably have about $120-something thousand worth of cost, labor cost, time cost, grant costs, just those kinds of things that are done. I can't tell you that every nickel of that's eligible, but that's what we're going to be going after on the first blush. There'll also be opportunities if the council wants to down the road to partner with neighboring agencies. If there is a particular issue that was of concern to one of your neighbors that was eligible and you wanted to partner with them, then you could also do that as well. So some of those conversations will continue to percolate. We'll have opportunities to do that. But if you look at our set aside distribution, apologies, it's about $262,000 that we could, there's no guarantee, but that we could seek potential reimbursement on. So, any questions of council or?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You don't need a vote for that, right? That was just info.
No, sir, we do need a vote to approve the memorandum of
I move that
understanding.
Resolution number 46, adopting memorandum of understanding for CARES Act fund.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries unanimously.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Discussion of RFP process for permanent town manager position. Robert Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. This one's a two-parter, and so I'll cover the action item first. The direction or the feedback that our office has gotten is the council has moved forward in considering a permanent town manager position is that there's a preference for an externally driven process involving a national recruiting firm. So is the first step toward this process, this resolution would appoint a pre-selection committee, and the primary charge of that committee would be to engage in dialogue with national recruiting firms and with an objective of identifying 3 to 5 that would be brought back to the larger council for consideration. We have there's been some initial outreach to CML, and they've got a list of recommended firms to take a look at. So I think the progress on this would be we could expect to make some pretty good progress quickly.
Great. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor. Excuse me, go ahead.
Well, this one again, I think this is a little bit more straightforward, simpler committee that it would sunset at the end of this process of trying to determine who the recruiting firm would be. So staff was, or our office thought that it would be appropriate to bring this forward and ask you to both create the committee and then also appoint your 2 council members to the committee tonight rather than stretching that process out over 2 meetings. So that's what we have before you for your consideration.
So my understanding is I've contacted the CML League, and they had 4 member firms that do searches, town manager searches. So they provided that to us. And previously, this prior council had hired Avery and Associates, which was the company that brought on the prior town manager. And so my thinking is that we have those 5 send out RFP requests. And my understanding is that, Robert, you feel comfortable sending out that RFP process, or?
We do, if that's the council's pleasure.
And then there won't be much to do, but we need just a group to sort of coordinate it, and in order to make it transparent and not have somebody be concerned that that's, rigged or anything else, we thought that we'd have 2 council people on it, and I'm recommending that we have the Mayor Pro Tem and myself do that. Our sole job will be to sort of help coordinate with Robert the RFP process, and then bring back to the council the 3, 4, or 5 top candidates for the job search, and have the council choose the one that it believes is the best. Any questions on that? Okay. So can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. This is a discussion item. One of the things that we currently have is our interim town managers on a month-to-month contract. And I would think it'd serve the town well that we had him completely through this process and committed to helping us. And so I would like to suggest that we direct the town attorney to amend his contract to extend it to December 31st, which is basically 6 months from now. And so I'm going to just throw that out as to what you guys think. It won't, this really an emotion, it's mainly the flavor of the council.
I have one comment, question, I guess. So I think it's a great idea. That way we know that Wes is on board with us through this. If he chooses to apply, we hope you do so. But then let's say we get towards December, and maybe our timeline isn't quite complete.
Extended, yeah.
Would we still have the same 15-day period that we have currently on that back end if we needed that extra time?
So, Robert, I think the question is there once we get to December, is there a rolling, I would think it'd be 1 month contract extension each time?
Sure, just a little bit of background discussion would probably be beneficial. So the current interim town manager contract has a date, and in that date, a term, and that term ran through June 1, and then it converted to an automatic month-to-month contract going forward from then on. It also has one of the traditional features of an at-will contract, which is a 15-day notice period. So notwithstanding the fact that contract ran through June 1, there's a provision in there allowing both the town and the contractor to terminate upon 15 days notice. And so our recommendation would be, when we bring back the addendum for your approval, would be solely to change that June 1 date to December 31, and to retain all the other provisions, including the mutual 15-day termination provision.
Okay. Rick.
You could even think about putting in a clause that allows that if both parties agree, the contract can be amended. And that gives you greater flexibility. Say, for instance, it's decided in 4 months, Wes has applied and he's going to be the man. Things could go faster than December 31st. Or if he decides he's not going to be the man and he wants to do something, if both parties agree, it just gives them a little bit of flexibility, I think, what we need.
It's a good point, Mayor Pro Tem. There is a provision in the current contract that allows for amendment through a mutual written arrangement.
Good. Any comments? Okay. So So just sort of a head nod, does everybody agree with proceeding that way? I think they do. So can you present that at our next meeting, Robert? Okay, Christine, 2021 budget calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've already talked about one of the items earlier today, and we've set July 28th as the high-level strategic budget planning meeting. And as the mayor mentioned, we'll finalize the start time, but that will be a half a day, so sometime around that noon hour or shortly thereafter. The other two items, as council, as you noted, the 2021 budget calendar that staff prepared has been included in the packet. My plan is not to go through the calendar. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. If not, I trust you will at your convenience. But just a couple other dates. We just kind of wanted to get a head nod, make sure that we understand that it is council's preference to move forward with some of the dates and things that we've included or incorporated as part of the budget. So we have put in the calendar that the actual work session to go through the actual draft budget would be held that first council meeting in October. That would be within the state budget law of October 15th. So that first Tuesday meeting in October will be October 13th. We wanted to make sure that we had an understanding what the preference would be of council. How long you want that work session to be would be entirely up to you and your desire. I've worked with councils that extend their budget work session to a 2 or 3 day work session. Others may establish a 2-hour work session. Tentatively, we're thinking about maybe something comparable to the strategic planning meeting, maybe somewhere in that 3 to 4 hour. So there's sufficient time to go through any and all questions that you have about the detailed draft budget that will be presented at that time. So wanted to make sure that that feels like what council's preference would be. We've also included, we haven't discussed in any kind of detail, but we do think it would be a nice thing to have a resident budget workshop again. We've done so in the last 2 years, what it would be, what the presentation would be. Certainly we would solicit council ideas, but we do think that that would be something that would be nice to have again this year, and we'd be looking at doing that sometime the second half of October, and that would be after council budget work session was held on October the 13th. So wanted to once again make sure that that was in line of council's desire and if that was okay. And then we would bifurcate the public hearing from the actual formal budget adoption. The budget adoption would take place December the 8th. It has to take place by December the 15th statutorily, because you also have to set your mills by December the 15th, because that needs to be certified with the county by that date. So adoption by council of the 2021 budget, December the 8th, and then we would look to have the public hearing, and we would have some kind of presentation along with that. In addition to that, the public would have the opportunity to comment on the draft budget and provide any anecdotal comments to the council for consideration prior to the adoption on December the 8th. So that would take place. We've put that in the budget on November the 10th. We're assuming that maybe your second meeting in November, as historically has happened with the Thanksgiving holiday, will be canceled. So I know I've thrown a lot out, but we just wanted to make sure that that made sense, and certainly would appreciate any comments or reactions from council or anything that you'd like staff to consider as part of the budget process for the 2021 budget year.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. I went to the budget workshop last October, and I found that really useful in trying to get up to speed when I was trying to look at running for council. So I enthusiastically endorse doing that again. I guess one question I'd have is, do we intend the finance committee to have any role in this process, even if with just the public hearing phase of this. I don't know if we've even thought about that, but is it something we foresee happening?
What I would anticipate is that the finance committee is, and I think Christine, you showed me that we were, or the stuff that I saw as write-up, that the finance committee would be reviewing the budget beforehand and coming back with you and the council to initially, and also that they would be reviewing it right before it's final then also. Now that's what I read.
We had that originally in the resolution that got amended, and so that's not included as part of the approved resolution. However, there is language in the resolution that council approved that says or states any additional thing that council wants the committee to take a look at. So certainly if that is something that council would like the committee to take a look at, certainly that could be part
I
of.
would think.
I just think the more citizen involvement we have and everything we're looking at is only a positive for us. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. We'll make a note of that and make sure that's on the agenda later in the year, but prior to the October session with council.
Thank you.
Any other reactions, thoughts, comments? I saw a couple head nod. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this up. 2 weeks ago, we received a letter from a lady that's involved with the Poudre School District as a parent, I believe. And she was inquiring our authority to actually use TDA funds in our general fund. And I just wondered if you're looking at that again, or if we should be concerned. I don't know if you're aware of it or not.
I was not aware of that.
It was a letter that was sent to all the council. And it's the same, I'm just very concerned about funds going from the TDA into our general fund, and to make sure that we're on really solid ground here. That's one of the things we can look at as we go forward.
Sure, absolutely. And we can bring that forward, maybe even as part of the July 28th discussion.
Yeah, and especially this year, because the highway funds, everything's going to be a game to try to get as much as you can with the shortfall that we're going to experience statewide and nationwide.
Here'd be my suggestion is Rick, would you forward that email to Christine, and then Christine, would you and your report next meeting comment on it?
Sure.
Well, it might be one of those things that even if she just sends back something to us.
Yes,
and not
that's
bring
fine
it up,
too.
because I don't want to raise issues.
Yeah, that's fine too.
Sure.
I just have one comment. I know we've talked about this in the past about having more detail related to our capital improvement. So I was wondering if we could just kind of think about that ahead of time and maybe really try to put more detail into what we as a council kind of envision for that longer term. I know some communities have 10, 20-page documents about where they want capital improvement funds to go. And I know ours is just, like one line thing. So maybe just something that we may want to spend more time looking at as we work towards the budget. I know that might take a little bit more time. So I just wanted to maybe mention that if others were interested in that as well.
I totally agree.
Remember, we've got the survey.
I think just on that note, I mean, I know there's a few items on there that the amounts are very much considered placeholders. It may be worth making that clear, just an asterisk or something, just this amount is known to be a placeholder. Just, I think that helps people understand where we're thinking, what we know and what we don't know.
And thank you for bringing that up. That certainly is going to be one of the probably more significant topics for the meeting on the 28th, with plenty of narrative maps and just a lot of detail. So council can have a productive discussion, a detailed discussion to make sure that the prioritization of the capital is in line with the vision of the council.
And I'm going to throw this out. I anticipate the finance committee they aren't going to be able to get up to speed by the 28th, but in July, August, as the budget is being formulated, that they're intimately involved with knowing what's happening there. These are people that are very, very financially astute, which, you know, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but it's, you know, a lot of us aren't on that. And I think they can provide the council with some good outside perspective of what's going on there. Okay, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Chief Jones, vehicles.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Tonight, I was just looking for a little bit of guidance on what council would like us to do. And when I say us, Audrey Johnson and myself have been gathering a tremendous amount of information on low speed, low energy type vehicles. And what I'm seeking from council is some guidance to help us. If you wish us to narrowly focus this on golf carts / golf cars, or more broadly look at all electric vehicles or low speed vehicles.
So here's my 2 bits on this one is, I mean, this thing's so expansive, and the emails that we've gotten are mainly totally directed at golf carts. You know, what's the rules? What do we do? And how's best to handle it? And so my thought is that we direct Chief Jones to, let's focus on golf carts first and what rules there are. And then after we do that, then we can expand it to rocket propelled tricycles or whatever else might be in that group. So does that sound good for everybody?
I have one question about that.
Go ahead.
In the state law, are they all lumped together in one thing, or are there multiple different areas in which they're all located?
No, state law addresses golf carts and golf cars, but there's a multitude of other vehicles out there, segways, big wheels, power wheels, go-karts, that may or may not be considered for a town ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Does that give you decent direction then, Chief Jones?
It does. That's why I took the mask off, Mayor, so I could smile about this.
Great. Thank you. Kim, I think you have a whole big long list here, so go ahead.
Mayor and Council, it's good to actually see you in person. I have a long list, but I will try to make it quick. A couple of updates and then some discussion items for you tonight. So I'm going to start with the community survey. We've heard a lot about that over this past meeting and past meetings as well. We were able to issue an RFP last month. We had 13 firms apply. We interviewed 3. And as you saw in your packet, we were actually going through that interview process last week. I wanted to come here tonight and share with you that we've selected the Center for Research and Public Policy. We actually had some really great proposals, and so I'm really excited about this group in particular. Why we chose them, there's 3 reasons, really. One was the idea that they're going to be doing an entirely digital format. Now, I say entirely digital, I should say primarily digital. We want to make sure that we get this survey distributed as widely as we can throughout our Timnath community. That said, we are going to willingly, easily, happily provide paper copies for those who prefer. And those paper copies will be mailed when completed directly to the research firm so that the town actually has no sort of in-between contact with those surveys. The reason that is important is that this primarily digital platform allows us to do this survey a whole lot faster. This firm proposed a timeline that was roughly 3 to 4 weeks faster than the others. And why I believe that's important is it allows you to actually have survey data as you develop the budget. Many of the other proposals, we were looking at getting that survey data in like November, and it seemed really hard to sort of retrofit that into your process. And so this timeline that you have in the memo that sort of came last minute on Monday shows that we're anticipating those results much, much sooner. I think the other piece that set this firm apart was this idea of customization. They're really willing to work with us and talk about how do we make this survey all about Timnath and very specific to our needs. Along those same lines, you'll see there's 2 dates that we've proposed to have this firm come out and talk to you. I talk with my hands. Have the firm come out and talk to you personally. That July 28th meeting, I believe. Is that the right date? To have an initial discussion with council about priorities, what should be in the survey, what shouldn't. I want to back that up even a little bit further and say, we already are providing them with notes from your retreat, where you spent some time talking about what you'd like to see in the survey. And clearly there are some suggestions over the last few months as well. We'll start them off with that list. And what they'll do is work on a draft to bring to you on July 28th for discussion. The other time you will see the firm in front of you, the vendor, is when they come back for results. It's always helpful to have the people who crunch the data actually be here to share the data, because you're going to have questions that I know I can't answer. That's the survey update. Do you have any questions about that? I will say that the contract is within the town manager's purchasing authority, so I don't need a resolution. I just wanted to share and see if you had any questions.
Hey, Kim, and I'm looking at you, everybody here too. The 28th, we've got a 4-hour
Yeah.
budget meeting, and then this, which I think we want to be focused and clean on and clear on. My suggestion, if we could, is do it the next meeting and discuss it. But I'm looking to you guys. What do you think? Yeah, and well, we've got some of the 14th too, so.
We could do it after.
If we slide 2 weeks, I'm not overly concerned. What does everyone here think?
I think the survey is a pretty high priority thing to get right, to get good feet, to get good direction on. And I think it makes sense to not put it right after a 4-hour number crunching session.
So
Speaking as an engineer even.
Of course.
1 week later.
Absolutely.
I'm not adverse if Kim all of a sudden
For 2 weeks.
and the mayor decide, let's have a special meeting somewhere fitted in for an hour.
Sure.
It's not the end of the world. Says the guy that's retired.
Yeah.
14th,
August 11th and
11th of
25th are
August.
your two.
If I may,
Well,
the 28th is, we've got a work session, we've got a regular meeting and also a GID, General Improvement District meeting.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the 28th, we do have 3 separate meetings with the work session, regular meeting, and General Improvement District meeting. The 11th has 1, 2, 3. Yeah, those will push. It's quite a bit lighter if you want to push to the August 11th.
Be gone August 11th. Let's sort of check and get back to you, Kim, because I think getting everybody's input would be important. And if, and I don't know, a 1-hour meeting, going with Rick's idea sometime.
Like on the 4th or something, August 4th or something.
August 4th or something like that might be the best way to go. So
we're still all locked down.
Yeah. So, let's plan on not the 28th.
Yeah.
And that we look to either the week after for a 1-hour meeting sometime or August 11th.
And we'll also need to take a look at the calendar, see if the planning commission is meeting on the 4th as well, and what may or may not be in front of them. So that'll give us a chance to re-huddle at our staff meeting tomorrow.
And I don't, we could audio record it and do it up in the conference room too or something, if just, because it's mainly us inputting it. We won't need, I guess people can show up, but it'd be sort of a boring show up.
I'll look to you to confirm with the mayor on what your calendar looks like. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. I also want to just reiterate for the people who stuck with us and are still watching this meeting, we are indeed having our fireworks show on July 4th. We are encouraging everyone to watch from home. If you can't see them from home, walk to your neighborhood park. Really encouraging folks to stay home, stay safe, and enjoy the show. We do have a contingency plan in place to make sure that our roads stay clear and that emergency vehicles can still get through the community. But fireworks are a go, festivities are canceled, but please watch them from home. So in case you have any questions, just a reminder. Now on to another event though. I wanted to talk to you tonight about the August summer concert. If you'll recall, way back when I came and said, we have plenty of time to decide whether or not we want to do this concert. We no longer have plenty of time to decide. Really want to get your opinions on whether or not you'd like to go ahead and cancel that. Right now, again, county restrictions are still saying no more, or groups of no more than 50 people. We usually get way more than that at the concert. So right now, the staff recommendation is to just go ahead and cancel the August event as well.
And even if they did, there would be significant restrictions. We'd have to go through the Larimer County waiver or the state waiver. So even if we got the green light at some point, it'd be late, which interferes with our ability to plan, which interferes with our ability to lock down vendors, to perform music, and just all the kinds of things that go with it. So it just makes it a little more challenging. And I don't think it's inconsistent with what we're seeing in some of our neighboring municipalities.
On that same topic, we were talking about putting that in conjunction with the grand opening for the park. I'm probably up. Could you go there and talk to us about
Next
that?
on our list
Yeah.
is talking about, we decided several weeks ago to delay the summer barbecue and have that event in conjunction with the opening of phase 2 of our community park. Now, the challenge with the summer barbecue, as you know, it's an actual barbecue and there's food everywhere, and it's probably not the safest environment for people to participate in a big community barbecue. We have a couple of suggestions that we outlined in your packet and wanted to just get a little bit of feedback from you. We can take the approach of doing a grand opening movie night. So again, really try to work on how do we social distance people. It'd be sort of similar to a drive-in movie, but people would just be sitting on the lawn and we'd X out spaces where they could be. That's all it would be. We wouldn't be providing food. We'd ask them to, either bring their own, or we could have an ice cream truck or a popsicle truck or something like that. The other option is to disperse it even further and just do an ice cream social around town. So perhaps at different community parks. Yes, we would still be highlighting the great improvements that have been made to our larger park, but encouraging people really just to get outside and enjoy their neighborhood as much as they possibly can. So we could organize different food trucks in different parts of the community and just sort of promote it almost like a neighborhood night out, if you're familiar with that program. So more of that kind of feel than an actual community event. And so I just wanted to present those two ideas to you tonight and see if you had any thoughts and feedback. Again, I would say I would even call the barbecue canceled, if you will. I don't want people's expectations to be that they're coming to a summer barbecue, because that's truly not what we're able to do with health precautions right now. But it would be nice to be able to provide something else.
For the park reopening, I mean, this would be an event where people are able to use the playgrounds. I mean, I know the parks are generally open now, but in terms of an event where lots of kids are able to gather in a large body and use the playgrounds, is that how this would kind of look?
Yeah, it might. And again, this would be August 28th is the date we're looking at. So this is a full 2 months from where we are now. And as we all just said, who the heck knows where that will be? I believe our playgrounds are open now. I'm looking.
Yeah, they are.
So similar, but it would likely.
But it's different scale than people
Yes.
just using it
Thank you,
casually now.
Brett, Yes, thank you.
I mean, it seems, I mean, my general philosophy is let's not try to go beyond what the county and state require of us. It just seems difficult to meet those guidelines where we're having a grand park reopening if nobody's really allowed to use the park.
I think we just have
The
to.
irony.
We just have to cancel these things and tell the residents that to be decided later when they can be rescheduled, and it's up to the county and the state.
I'm
I do
excited
like
we're
your
doing the
neighborhood.
fireworks, and so
Yeah.
we at least got something
Yeah.
going there.
Yeah, and I think
Yes,
Windsor
Matt.
is still going to have their firework, or, yeah, but they're not saying anything about it.
Correct. Loveland is also doing fireworks, and they actually are having people come to a location and watching them. So
Well, the county and Fort Collins combined to have something at the ranch as well for
And
4th
they're
of July.
promoting that pretty heavily.
I had wanted to add one thing about the park, if you don't mind. We are getting some special event permit kind of things that are coming in. And one of them is the Bags, Bites and Brews, which is a nonprofit for the Kawasaki kids. And they had it last year at the community park. And one of our requirements that we've stated to them is that they meet those county and state guidelines for appropriateness for having an event like that. So we're going to be reviewing those permit requirements right now. So they're asking to use the park because they used it last year. And so we're looking at it in those guidelines and allowing it if they're able to meet those requirements. So I just wanted to make you aware that that's kind of the twist that we have that we're working against.
I'd be careful of setting expectations of somebody that thinks they're gonna have 200 people show up at an event and we have to tell them no, or then we have to police it. Chief Jones probably wouldn't like that.
Correct.
So, I'd be really careful.
Well, that's why we're putting the burden on the applicant, so to speak, in this case, to make sure that they're putting all the procedures in place, that they demonstrate that they're meeting those things. But I hear exactly what you're saying, that there is a concern there that we've raised with them as well.
Yeah, the other one was a cornhole tournament.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Is that application actually moving forward, or is that one that?
It is moving forward. They've
Okay.
asked, they're putting their documentation together right now.
Okay.
Submitting it.
Okay.
And it would be in that same August, I apologize to keep interrupting, but it was in the same August kind of timeframe as when the grand opening of the park is going to be.
What else, Kim?
No, that's wonderful direction. The last thing that's in the council memo is just a reiteration of the paving project that Don mentioned earlier, and just a little bit of peace of mind for you. We are working on a more comprehensive outreach plan to all the properties and neighbors impacted by that. And in addition to letters, we'll be doing door hangers and social media next door and all those good pieces as well. We'll make sure to have it on our website. So if you get any questions, you can send people there.
Kim,
That's it.
thanks for your great work.
Absolutely.
Do we have anything else anybody wants to mention and stuff? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That was loud.
No. Oh, sorry.
Outvoted, outvoted.
Robert.